Be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. Now, everything in this world that causes you pressure, everything in this world that causes you trouble, you need to know that you're in union with somebody who's bigger and badder and tougher than anything in this world.
Amen.
We've got a higher authority that we can go to
Yes.
and lean on. And if you need to, complain to. I shouldn't say that. But he wants to know what's on your heart. That's one purpose for prayer, is to unburden yourself of all the things that are on your mind. But he says, I've spoken these things to you, that in me you might have peace, in the world tribulation. Now, what you experience in your life, let me just give you a little thought to chew on mentally. What you experience in your life depends largely on which one of those two you've set your mind on. Which one of those two things you focus your attention on. Now, if you focus your attention wholly on everything going on in this world, you're going to feel and experience all the pressure and trouble that goes on in this world. But did you know you don't have to do that? Even though there's pressure, even though there's trouble, even though there's tribulation, you don't have to experience it in your life. You don't have to let it weigh you down. You can choose to set your mind in a higher place on your union with Jesus and all the things that pertain to that. And guess what? It will give you peace. You can have peace in the midst of trouble. Now, I want to conclude with the Apostle Paul one more time. And again in Philippians chapter 4 this time. And I want to share with you something Paul said. Here's a guy who knew what trouble was. Here's a man who knew what pressure was. The Apostle Paul, when he switched from being a Pharisee to being a believer in Jesus and began to preach Jesus, his former friends, the other Pharisees, didn't like that very much. And if you read the book of Acts, you find out he got into a lot of trouble and was finally arrested. And he appealed to Caesar to get out of the hands of the Jews. And he's being transported to Rome to appeal before Caesar. And at this point, when he's writing the letter to the Philippians, he's in a Roman jail, a Roman prison. Now, I'm sure the Roman prisons are not nearly as sanitary and nice as the prisons that we have around here. I don't know what was going on, but I imagine it wasn't very pleasant. Nevertheless, in this book of Philippians, he uses the word rejoice over and over again. Here is a guy who's imprisoned, and we might say wrongly imprisoned, experiencing all the trouble and pressure that goes along with that. Look at verse 4 in chapter 4, Philippians chapter 4, verse 4. He says, rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. He writes from prison. Rejoice. Let your moderation be known unto all men. The Lord is at hand. Verse 6. Be careful for nothing, this man in prison writes. This man experiencing all. And not only that, by the way, he is in prison waiting to appear before Caesar. Now don't picture in your mind, Caesar Augustus or one of those earlier Caesars who was noble and just and like a philosopher king. The guy who's Caesar at this point is Nero. Nero, if you know anything about history, was a madman. He was a lunatic. He put people to death at a whim. He was crazy. He put Christians up on poles and dipped them in tar and set them on fire to light his gardens. And Paul is getting ready to come appear before him. Now, how would you feel? You think you have to deal with some nutty people. Listen, he's getting ready to go appeal before Caesar, who, tradition tells us that eventually Caesar cut his head off. So Paul has every reason to feel apprehensive, and to feel anxiety, and to feel afraid. Yet here he writes, he says, be careful for nothing. You know what that means? Be carefree. Anton or Elliot, who's there? Would you give me the Amplified on this verse? She's just excited about them. This is a great message. That's okay. That's okay. Laughing's better than crying. Listen to this. Do not fret or have any anxiety about anything. How's that for an instruction from the Bible? Now, you might feel like closing your Bible right now. No, he says, listen, he's going to tell you why in just a second. Do not fret or have any anxiety about anything. Paul is talking about the same thing Jesus said, that even though in the world there's pressure, in me you can have peace. Do not fret or have any anxiety about anything. Well, what am I going to do instead? But, he said, in other words, here's the alternative. But in every circumstance and in everything. Now, how many circumstances does that include, by the way? Well, about 50%. No, he says in every circumstance and in everything. Well, in the big things. No, big things, little things, things in between. Like I heard, I was listening to a tape by a man named Gary Garner, and he said that when he first became a Christian, he was so excited about being a Christian and the idea that he could come and pray to God and God would hear his prayers. And He said he would just pray about everything. And one day he came home and told his mom, he said, "Mom, I'm so excited. I went downtown to a business and I prayed and asked God to give me a parking place. And here a car pulled out and I got a parking place right in front of the front door of the business." And his mom said, "Oh," she'd been a Christian a long time. "Oh, son, you shouldn't bother God about those little things. You shouldn't bother God about those little things." Then he left the house kind of crestfallen, because he thought he'd done the wrong thing. He said, he prayed again. He said, "Oh, God, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to trouble you with those little things." And he said, well, God spoke to my heart. He said, "Well, son, don't you know they're all little things to me?" What are the big things? They're all little to God. So in everything, that's what the point is. In everything, and in every circumstance, or what I would say, anything that causes you any anxiety at all, anything that causes you any worry or pressure, can I use that word? Anything that's pressure from the world, anytime you experience that or you're conscious of that, here's what you do. In every circumstance and in everything, by prayer and petition, definite requests, with thanksgiving, continue to make your wants known to God. Now he says, instead of feeling all this pressure and all this care and all this worry and anxiety, go to your Father that's in heaven, your Father in heaven. Go and tell Him about all those things. And by the way, leave them with Him. Because all the things that cause you worry and care and anxiety are all things beyond your control. Did you know nobody ever worries about things that are under their control? The only thing that causes us anxiety, care, and worry are things that are outside of our control. But guess what? They're not outside of God's either control or influence. Now I condition that way because I don't believe God takes individuals and makes them do anything. But God can exert influence on people. I don't think God makes people do things as puppets, I think He exerts influence. But the point is, God can do things that you can't do. So give your cares and your requests to God.